Hello, boys and girls. My name is Mike Kelly, Real Illusion Forum. You can reach me at Mike at Kellytown, Kelley, town.com. Anyway, today I'm going to send out my plugin, the beta version of this plugin, to those of you that have already requested it. And you can go ahead and request it by sending me an email. Be glad to send it out to you. It's still in beta. There's still a few things we need to get done about it, but it's worth at least experimenting with. But I want to show you some things about it. First of all, you're going to need a configuration file in your documents directory, and it will automatically find that. So it should be called daz.config.cfg, and I'll send my version of this to you, and you can edit this with Notepad. It's just a text file. And you need to have where your DAZ content is located. And you can find that if we bring up DAZ here. You can find that in your by bringing up DAZ if you're not really quite sure where it is. If you go to any one of your projects here and you right click on them, and you can somewhere here browse the file location, and it will show you basically where all this stuff is stored. If you don't really know it already, I actually happen to know my path, but it's coming up here eventually. The use alley here. There it is. So here, my DAZ content is on the G. DAZ content. That's it. So you'll notice that on the thing here, I have G DAZ content / no quotes. Okay. The compress line is if you want it to compress the textures that are over 1K to 1K. So in other words, anything over 1K, anything over 1024 by 24 will be compressed to that. If you don't want that, just make that false there. I may eventually have that so that you can choose what level of compression, but right for now it just is 1K. And then the final thing is output directory. This is just where it writes temporary files. It has to write some temporary files when it compresses the files and does some other manipulations. So again, no /, but no quotes around it. So that's your config file. And then you'll go ahead and run it. I want to show you running this, but I want to show you first, we're going to load this in. I'm going to load in this bowling lodge. You see, there's two separate ways of loading this in. There's iRay and there's the regular, what they call 3D Delight. I loaded this in DAZ in iRay. And when I exported it, let's bring this up here, bowling lounge. See, 3D Delight. So I exported it as 3D Delight. When you have a huge set, and this bowling set is huge. As a matter of fact, I'm going to guess that a lot of you aren't going to be able to use it. I have a 3090 card, so obviously I have a lot more memory than most people do on my video card. I have 24 gigs. If you try to use this bowling lounge, you may have to cut it down to where you only have parts of it or like some sections of it and not the whole thing. But it's important to see how it works because it's illustrative of a lot of different things, even if it isn't particularly for everybody. So the bowling lounge, I'm loading in the 3D Delight version, not the iRay version. And when I talk about iRay, I'm not using iClone iRay. I never have used it. I don't care for it. So, but the textures sometimes in an iRay file in DAZ match up better to the PBR textures inside of iClone. So that's what I'm going to show you here, is that sometimes it's better to use that. So first of all, it always asks this if it has meshes it can break up. We generally want to break them up. The only reason you wouldn't want to break it up is if it's a kind of a smaller set and you don't intend to be using separate pieces. But we always generally want to break up anything that's large like this, and that gives us the ability to move items around inside, also to delete items that you're not using, to just it gives you a lot more flexibility. You might have doors that you can open that way. You might have chairs you can move. You might have chairs you can delete or duplicate, get more chairs, for example. There's lots of different things if you can break the mesh up. So for the most part, I recommend breaking it up. But also for my routine, when you have 300 meshes like this, and we've talked about this on the forum too, it's going to slow iClone down a tremendous amount. So you're going to want to break it up so that you can deal with small sets of meshes at a time. You're not going to want to run my routine to grab the textures on 300 meshes, unless you just want to let your machine sit for a few days, assuming that it won't crash at that point. It probably would crash. So it's loading in, and I will cut this out. Okay, and now we're loaded in here. First thing you want to do every time you load in like a DAS set or an item or prop is you might want to zero it out. See, it's not set at the right place. If you zero it out, it actually gets set at the starting scene pivot point. So here we have this ginormous bowling alley, and it is ginormous. If we get back here, there's just all kinds of stuff to this. So first thing we want to try, I want to show you, is if we come around, whoops, we're on the outside. It's even got an outside to it. So if we come around here, now I'm going to run this routine on this bar that's in this middle here. I want to show you here. We'll go to the bar. I need to go to the bar, believe me. It's been one of those days. Okay, so here we go. So there's a bar here, okay? So first thing, if we look at the scene, you can see that here's the main bowling lounge, but if you open it up, if you expand it with this expansion, you'll see all these different sub-objects. Well, if you try to run my routine without taking these sub-objects out, it won't work, okay? You have to have these not be sub-objects in order for the routine to work. So if we click on this, which is the bar shape, to get it outside, to get it to not be a sub-object anymore, we have to go here to modify, and then we go to detach, okay? So now if you go into the scene, you'll see it's not part of that alley process. We can roll that up, and now the bar shape is separate, okay? So now we can run the routine just on that bar shape, and you can see by looking at it that it doesn't really have any textures, but if you go into modify to look at the textures, always has the base color, but that's really all we have on this. So I'm going to run the routine, go to cancel, script, always load Python, and it'll be called read def file. It'll also have a version on it. Actually, I'm probably going to change the name on that, but you'll have it, so I'm just going to send it to you. So read that there. The first thing it does is it goes to your DAS content. That's why we wanted to know where that content was. And you have to know where that environment has to be. You might say to me, well, Mike, how do I know where that particular is? Well, again, if you go to DAS and you have an object loaded in here, you go in here. Remember how we did this before? We went in, and that's so you can see right there. It's in DAS content props thieves alley. Okay, you see where that file path is located in the middle? So that's how you would find out where it's located. That's also a better way to find out where your DAS content path is. So there you go. You don't even have to open the folder up for that. All right, so in this particular case, I happen to know that it's under environments, and I know it's under bowling lounge. And I'm going to use the scene I loaded in, which was that Duff scene here. Okay, not the iRay scene. Notice it's finished. It did absolutely nothing to this. You might say, well, Mike, your routine isn't so hot then. That's true. It isn't great on this particular case because in this particular case on 3D Delight, there are no other textures. So what we really want to do is we want to run the iRay version. So even though I loaded in the version of the 3D Delight version in my to generate it, I can still use the iRay version to actually have it find materials. And notice it says starting, it gives you a starting time, and now it's actually going to go through and look for those materials for this. So what it's doing, just so you know, you can actually look at the code too, but it's actually going through that duff file, which is the DAS format file. It expands it if it happens to be zipped. If it's not, it's just an ASCII file. And it finds the textures that are assigned to each of those objects. You'll see it takes a while. It actually doesn't take a while to find those textures. It finds them like immediately, like in 10 seconds. But it takes a while to assign those textures to the item. So you'll notice now it's assigned them, and now it looks a whole lot better. It's got some reflection and stuff going on there. And if we go to modify, you can see that it has metallic, roughness, and even glow textures assigned to it. So as you can see, you go through here, and that's the shelf doesn't, but platform does have, again, that stuff, displacement, glow stuff, and the bar has all those things assigned to it. So there they all are. They're all in there. So that's basically how you do it. I'll show you one more thing here with this, just to give you an idea of an item here. So again, this is an item here in the scene. This is the stage. You can always see by just double clicking it. If I run the routine on this, though, without taking that out of this lounge, nothing will happen, okay? Again, remember, you got to go to Modify, you got to go up here, and you have to detach it. Detach it. So now it's detached in the scene. It's outside that scene. So if we roll up all these scenes together, it's separate. So now we can go to the council. You don't have to go to the council. By the way, the council log just shows you what's happening. You don't actually have to see that. It's if you wanted to find that, it's here in council log, so you can see it. But I like to see what's going on, and it also gives me error messages on some things where we will have to have those error messages when we're finding things. And when you find something that does give you error messages and things, let me know. Just send me an email back and we'll keep working on it. This is far from perfect. It's going to get a lot of the stuff it needs. It's going to do the best it can. There's some textures it won't find. There's still some bad developers out there that write things in such a way that it's even impossible to make this work. And also, there's some very, very large sets that it just won't work on. But for the most part, this does a really good job at assigning the textures if you're patient and take the time. And again, like I said, it takes a while. You can see the video memory right now is huge on there. I'm going to show you one more thing about that too, though. I'm going to show you the Terminator one, because somebody had mentioned in the first video I showed how the Terminator was taking up like 17 gigs or 16 gigs. Okay, we're finished. And it's going to take a little while for those textures to kind of load in, but there they go. They're emissive textures. So now we've got those textures loaded in. So that's what you would do. And we're going to bring in the Terminator. I did this before. Those of you might recall in the very first video. This was, as a rule, you only want to use this Python script on environment, sets, props, or non-Genesis avatars. That means if you have clothing, don't use it on clothing. Don't use it on Genesis figures. It should still be used with the CC3 transformer. That still is to get that stuff into iClone. But for everything else, and this particular thing I'm loading in is a non-Genesis avatar for a prop or for a set or a scene. This will do a pretty good job of getting it. So here's the robot, and you can see right now he's already taking 7 gigs of memory. That's because of all the diffuse maps that are loaded in there. So now we want to go ahead and run the routine. We can always clear the log if you want to see what's happening here. Load the Python. I actually happen to know where he comes from. He comes from people and Cyborg Generation 8. And this particular guy is the Cyborg. This takes about 4.5 minutes to load in. I'm not going to wait for this whole time, so we'll see on the side. Okay, and now we're back, and there's the textures. Now, you'll notice, too, we started off with memory that was about 7.9, and it actually went down. Remember, we're loading in compressed versions of these maps. You might still say to me, though, Mike, and it's perfectly legitimate, well, almost 8 gigabytes is a lot of memory. Yes, it is. And in this particular case, we can't always do this, but in this particular case, what we can do is we can go up to here to any of the textures, doesn't matter which ones, and you go over to here to where it says auto link all material textures. So we're in the textures, right down here where all those textures are. We hit auto link, and what it does is it tries to find textures that match each other. And if it finds textures that match each other, then it puts links in and it only uses those maps for those textures. So when we go in to do that, let's see if we can get out. It may take a while to refresh its memory as it auto refreshes. And now you can see, now the video memory has gone down to 2.5 gigabytes. So there's a much more reasonable situation. We actually could lower this even more. The one thing I don't do here, my routine that loads in the textures, when it goes in to load textures in, and it loads in the bump, metallic, and roughness, it actually doesn't do anything with the base color. So if I hover over here, hopefully you can see, notice that says at the bottom, hopefully you can read that, where it says width is 4096 by 4096. This is still a 4K texture. All the other textures I loaded in, if we go to this one, you'll see 1024 by 1024. I reduced all the other textures down to 1K, but I didn't do anything with the base color textures. And actually, that's because they're already loaded in the file. But I could indeed write a routine that would reduce those as well. How much would this work on this file? I don't know. It might lower it maybe under 2 gig, maybe, possibly. I don't know if it's worth the effort, but if it may be something that I do. So you'll see that if you do. So I'm going to load one more thing in because it's pretty quick. I'm going to show you. But again, remember that you have to have patience. This is a very, very fast machine. And if my machine takes this long on some of these things, then you may just have to go away and have a meal or have a cup of coffee at the very least and come back and see it. So, but if it takes more than an hour, I would say it's not going to work. Again, remember to split it up into smaller scenes or smaller segments or smaller objects. Don't do all the objects at once. Do some of them, for example. And we're going to, again, this 35. This I could actually leave as one object, but I'm going to break it up again into different meshes just to show you some other things it brings in. A lot of times, opacity maps, you might have noticed on some things that you loaded in, come in on FBX. In this particular case, the opacity maps do come in, but they're wrong. So, for example, if I go here to the visual, to the scene, history, and I go to the palm tree, let's sort this, palms. And again, remember, if we want to take this out, we go to modify, and then we go to detach. And so now it's out of the scene, it's detached from the parent prop. So now we can manipulate and do things with it. So if you look at this, it's got an opacity map in it, but the opacity map isn't working. That's the part of the problem in iClone is opacity maps have to be RGB. They can't be any other format, and this is not an RGB map. It doesn't come over from DAS as RGB, but of course, because I'm so brilliant, no, because I'm kind and nice. I don't know what the reason is, but I definitely have got it to where I convert those maps. Essentially, is what I'm doing. I convert those so that they will be transparent, so that you can get the transparency of the textures. And there it goes. So you can see that there's transparency. So that's one thing that I do with maps that aren't transparent from iClone. We have the same problem with this stuff down below here. I think it's these plants down here. Again, modify. It's always good to get through this, attach or detach it. It's always good to do the same things over and over again so you get an idea how it works. So there's plants outside, and again, if I run that script for those plants, I'm not ready for the plants, but for that item that I've selected, and you can select more than one item, by the way. Oh, let's do that. I've got the plants selected. I'll show you that too. We'll go into the scene and we'll take these little barrel things, these clay pots, I think they are called. What are a clay pot? Here we go. These things here. Is that what they are? No, that's not. Jug pot, maybe? Where are they? All right, let's find out where they are. These are these things here. Oh, there they are. Oil clay pot. Okay, we'll get those. So again, we have to go ahead and we have to detach those. Attach those. We're going to scene. So they're detached. So now we have those three things. We're taking the clay pots and these plants. So we go here. I'm sorry, go to console. Might want to clear it out just to see what's going on with the script. Sometimes it helps to clear it out. Anyway, but you can select more than one item. As you can see, it did both of the pots when I selected both the pots, and now it did the plants. So anyway, that's basically how it works, and gathers up all the textures and does as much as it can to make it the way it is in DAS. There's other little tips and tricks I'll give you as we go along about working with not only this, but just converting a DAS file into iClone. But I think that, the other thing I should mention too is this, right now this only works in FBX. Can't really do it on an OBJ file, so it has to be in FBX. In some of my other routines, I talk about using a Caladra, I don't know how to pronounce that, file out of DAS and then bring it into Blender and then bring it into here. And I think we can still do that, but we can't do an OBJ. It has to be an FBX. So, okay, hopefully this will solve some of your problems. And like I say, for those of you that are already written to me, I'm going to send this out this evening. And for the rest of you, go ahead and write Mike@kellytown.com, Kelley, and we'll see you on the forums.